The beeping was the only sound I remember. Not voices, not footsteps. Just that steady, mechanical beeping that meant something inside me was still working, even when I wasn't sure I wanted it to. I'd been standing in the cereal aisle at the superstore on Portage Avenue. I remember that part clearly because I was holding a box of oatmeal and thinking it was too expensive, $6.49 for oatmeal. My mother used to buy the same brand for 99 cents, and then I wasn't standing anymore. I was on the floor. The linoleum was cold against my cheek, and someone's cartwheel was 2 inches from my face, and I could hear a woman saying, "Oh my God, someone call 911." That woman, I would later learn, stayed with me until the ambulance came. She held my hand. She told me her name was Harriet, not Harriet from my list, a different Harriet, a stranger. And she kept saying, "You're going to be okay, sweetheart. Just breathe. Just breathe." My son didn't pick up the phone. Not once. Not twice. The paramedic, a young man with kind eyes and red hair, told me afterward that they'd called the emergency contact number on my health card 51 times over the next 36 hours. 51. I keep coming back to that number. 51 times my phone rang somewhere, wherever my son was. And 51 times he looked at the screen and chose not to answer. I'm 73 years old. I've lived in Winnipeg my whole life. I raised my son in a 3-bedroom house on Lipton Street, the one with the blue shutters that I repainted every 4 years because the winters cracked them. I drove him to hockey practice at 5:30 in the morning when the temperature was -30, and the car took 3 tries to start. I helped him with university applications, co-signed his first apartment lease, sat in the 3rd row at his wedding. Because his mother-in-law insisted on the seating plan, and I didn't want to cause a fuss. I have never once, in 73 years, not answered the phone when they kept me for 4 days. A cardiac event, they called it, a serious one, the kind that required a stent and 2 nights in the ICU, and a conversation with a cardiologist named Dr. Patel, who sat down across from me with the particular gentleness that doctors use when they're explaining that things could have gone much worse. "You're lucky someone was there," he said. I thought of Harriet and her cartwheel and her hand holding mine. On the 3rd morning, my roommate in the cardiac ward, a woman named Gloria who'd had her own scare and was already back to doing crosswords and complaining about the food, told me I had a notification on my phone. My daughter-in-law had posted something on Facebook, public post. Gloria's granddaughter had seen it and recognized my name in a comment someone else had left. I didn't want to look. I looked anyway. It was a photograph. My son, his wife, and their 2 children, my grandchildren, 8 and 11 years old, whom I adore absolutely, standing on a dock somewhere, laughing, all of them in life jackets, the sky behind them the particular deep blue that only happens in September in cottage country. The caption said, "Family time. No phones, no stress, just us." Posted 2 days after I collapsed in the cereal aisle. 1 day after the hospital had called 51 times. I put the phone face down on the blanket and looked at the ceiling for a long time. Gloria said very quietly, "Honey, do you want me to call the nurse?" I said no. I said I was fine. I've been saying I was fine for so long it comes out automatically now, like breathing. I'm going to tell you the whole thing. I'm going to tell it the way it actually happened, not the way I've rehearsed it in my head for the past 8 months. The cleaner version where I sound more dignified. You deserve the real version. My son's name is Trevor. He's 44 years old. Works in commercial real estate, and he has his father's jaw and my eyes, and a way of tilting his head when he's about to say something dismissive that I've been recognizing since he was 16. His wife's name is, I'm going to call her my daughter-in-law, because that's what she is. That's the only thing she's ever really been to me. A title, a role, not a person I ever fully knew. She came from money, old Winnipeg money, the kind that doesn't talk about money because it doesn't need to. Her parents had a winter place in Arizona and a summer place on Lake of the Woods, and opinions about everything, including me. I was a retired school librarian from the North End. I drove a 2009 Honda Civic, And I clipped coupons and I brought store-brand wine to their dinner parties because I didn't know I wasn't supposed to. I don't think she ever disliked me exactly. I think I was just not quite the right kind of mother-in-law, and she was too well-bred to say so directly. So instead it came out in 100 small ways over 15 years. The Christmases where the invitation came a little too late for me to change my plans. The birthday dinners where my seat was at the far end of the table, near the kitchen. The grandchildren's school concerts where somehow there was only one ticket left by the time they let me know. Trevor saw all of it. I know he did. He has my eyes. He never said a word. The first year after his father died, Dennis, my husband, gone 6 years ago now, pancreatic cancer, very fast, 3 months from diagnosis to the end. Trevor was attentive. He called every Sunday. He came for dinner sometimes. He helped me understand the paperwork, the RRSP transfers, the survivor benefits, all the bureaucratic machinery of grief that nobody prepares you for. I was grateful. I told him that. I thought we were going to be okay, the two of us. Then his wife decided they were moving to a bigger house, and Trevor needed to ask me something. The house on Lipton Street, the one with the blue shutters. Dennis and I had paid it off the year before he was diagnosed. When he died, it came to me. It was worth, at that point, around $380,000. That's not nothing in Winnipeg, even now. My daughter-in-law had found a house in Tuxedo. 5 bedrooms, triple garage, a kitchen I can only describe as aspirational. The asking price was $1.2 million. Trevor's pre-approval was for $900,000. Mom, he said. We were sitting at his kitchen table and he had made coffee and his, which I understood, was intentional. You've been talking about downsizing anyway. I had said that once. I'd said it the way you say things when you're newly widowed and the house feels too large and you can't sleep in the room you shared with someone for 38 years. I hadn't meant it as a promise. If you sold the house, he said, and moved into something smaller, a condo, maybe, somewhere nice, you'd have equity you're not using. And we've always said the grandchildren should have a proper space when they come to see you. He wanted $300,000. A loan, he called it, with the understanding that it would come back to me through the estate. Eventually, I said I would think about it. I thought about it for 2 months. I talked to my friend Nettie, who is 81 and still sharper than anyone I know. And Nettie said, Marjorie, that money is your security. Once it's gone, it's gone. I talked to my own financial advisor, a young woman named Sandra who works out of an office on Pembina Highway, and Sandra said something similar with more numbers attached. In the end, I said no. Trevor took it well on the surface. He said he understood. He said, of course, no pressure, forget he'd mentioned it. But something shifted after that, the way ice shifts in March. You can't see it change, but you know something underneath has moved. The Sunday calls became less frequent. The dinner invitations stopped. My daughter-in-law was always pleasant when I saw her, perfectly pleasant. A pleasantness that covered everything like a coat of fresh paint. My grandchildren still wanted to see me. I held on to that. I made the drive to Tuxedo. I brought butter tarts from the bakery on Corydon that my grandson loves. I sat on their perfect kitchen floor and played Lego with him and pretended not to notice that his mother left the room every time I came in. I told myself families go through phases. I told myself this was just a rough patch. I told myself a lot of things. Then September came, and I collapsed in the superstore on Portage Avenue and woke up to a beeping machine and a stranger's hand and 51 missed calls going nowhere. When I finally got my phone back, I did call Trevor. The day after I saw the photograph, Dr. Patel had just finished his morning rounds, and I was feeling, not angry exactly. I was past angry by then, but very, very clear. He picked up on the second. Mom. His voice was carefully neutral. I was going to call you. Were you? I said. We just got back last night. The cottage has no reception. You know how it is up at the lake. The hospital called 51 times, I said, over 36 hours. A pause. Mom, I'm not asking you to explain. I just wanted you to know the number. 51. He came to the hospital that afternoon. His wife did not. He brought flowers, yellow chrysanthemums, the kind from the gas station, still in the plastic sleeve, and he sat in the chair beside my bed, and he talked, mostly. He talked about the cottage and the kids, and how he'd been under so much pressure at work, and how he'd needed the disconnection, really needed it. His therapist had actually recommended it. He said he was sorry. He said it the way people say sorry when they're not quite sure what they're apologizing for. I looked at him, and I saw my eyes in his face, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel in that moment, which was grief. Not anger, just grief, old and quiet, for whatever we might have been. I said, "Thank you for coming." I did not tell him what I had decided. There is a woman who lives in my building now. I moved into a condo on Wellington Crescent 6 months before all this happened, because I genuinely had wanted to downsize by then, on my own timeline, my own choice, and her name is Dottie. She's 68, retired nurse, came to Winnipeg from Barbados in 1985, and has the most precise and beautiful way of saying exactly what she thinks. Dottie had been the one who called the ambulance when I didn't answer my door that morning. She had my spare key. She found me gone and called 911, and then called the hospital until someone would tell her something. She visited me every single day I was in the hospital. She brought my own pajamas from home and my hand cream and a paperback mystery I'd been in the middle of, and she sat with me and watched Jeopardy reruns and talked when I wanted to talk and was quiet when I didn't. On the third day, when I told her about the photograph, about the lake, about the 51 calls, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? My husband Dennis had a life insurance policy. Not enormous, but substantial enough, $160,000, because Dennis was careful and quiet and loved me in the way that means you think about what happens after you're gone. I had kept it in a savings account at Steinbach Credit Union, untouched for 6 years, because I didn't know what to do with it, and touching. It felt like the final admission that he was really, fully, permanently gone. I also had the proceeds from the sale of the Lipton Street house. I'd bought the Wellington Crescent condo for $210,000. Small but lovely, good light, a balcony where I could see the elms, which left me with about $170,000 in equity from the sale. In total, I was sitting on roughly $330,000. Not a fortune, but security. Real security, the kind that means you don't have to ask permission. I called Sandra, my financial advisor, from my hospital bed the day after Trevor visited. I told her I wanted to review my will. Let me tell you what my will had said before. The Lipton Street house, gone now, but the principal remained, and whatever I'd accumulated, the savings, the investments, the life insurance proceeds, everything was to go to Trevor. There was a bequest for Nettie's favorite charity, the Literacy Foundation she'd volunteered with for 40 years. There was my mother's ring going to Trevor's wife, because I thought that was what you did. That was the whole document. Straightforward, simple, the way Trevor had actually suggested it be when we'd talked about it after Dennis died. I had Sandra connect me with an estate lawyer. His name was Mr. Okonkwo, out of an office downtown, and he came to the hospital on a Thursday afternoon in a good suit and listened to me for 45 minutes without writing anything down. Just listening, before he picked up his pen. Because this is still about my son we're talking about, and despite everything, he's my son. I'm not a person who wants to cause pain. That's not who I am. But I also learned something in that hospital room, in those 4 days of beeping and ceiling gazing and chrysanthemums still in the plastic sleeve. I learned that I had spent a very long time arranging my life around the feelings of people who were not arranging their lives around mine. The new will was straightforward too, different but straightforward too. Trevor would receive $50,000. Enough to be meaningful, not enough to be a windfall. The rest, divided between my grandchildren's RESP app accounts, which I set up directly in both their names, the Literacy Foundation, and a particular beneficiary I'll tell you about in a moment. Trevor would not control and could not touch until the grandchildren were adults. I did not tell Trevor any of this. I came home from the hospital on a Thursday. Dottie had stocked my fridge. She'd bought the oatmeal, the same brand, $6.49, and put it on the counter with a post-it note that said, "I know, it's highway robbery." I laughed for the first time in 2 weeks. The weeks after were quiet. Trevor called occasionally. The calls were short, slightly careful, like someone walking on thin ice. I was polite. I asked about the grandchildren. I did not mention the hospital, the photograph, the 51 calls. I had said my piece. I had done my thinking. I didn't need to say anything else. What I was watching for, without letting myself say so, was whether anything would change, whether he would come by, whether my daughter-in-law would call, whether the Sunday calls would come back, whether someone would suggest I come for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a big holiday in our family. Has been since the kids were small. Dennis used to make the turkey, never let anyone else touch it, had a whole system involving butter under the skin and a thermometer and a very specific basting schedule, and I would do everything else. After Dennis died, I kept doing Thanksgiving. I hosted it twice at Lipton Street before Trevor and his wife decided it made more sense to host, more space, easier for the kids. That was fine. I understood. That Thanksgiving, the first one after the hospital, I received a text message on the Saturday before. My daughter-in-law wishing me a happy Thanksgiving. A lovely little text, emoji and everything. No invitation. I ordered butter chicken from a place on Osborne Street and watched a documentary about birds and feel fully, completely what I was feeling thankfully. The wangsh was sad. Not dramatic, not wrong, just sad. For a long time. Quietly. Then I finished my butter chicken and washed the dishes and thought, all right then. Here is what I did not expect. A month after Thanksgiving, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't pick up. I've gotten cautious about that. But something made me answer. It was my grandson. My older one, who's 11 now. He'd borrowed a friend's phone at school, apparently, because his own phone had been taken away as a punishment for something unrelated, and he'd looked up my number. He'd memorized it. He told me proudly, and he wanted to know if he could come see me on Saturday. I said, of course. I said I would make butter tarts. He came on the Saturday, dropped off by a friend's parent, and stayed for 4 hours. We played cards, and I taught him how to make my mother's shortbread, and we watched half of a nature documentary, and he fell asleep on my couch, just for 20 minutes, the way children do. When he woke up, he looked at me very seriously and said, "Grandma, Mom said you were sick in the fall." I was, I said. "I'm better now. She said you were in the hospital for a few days." Yes, he was quiet. Then, "Why didn't we visit you?" I thought about that for a moment. I said, "Sometimes adults make choices that they have to sort out between themselves. That wasn't your choice to make." "You were at the lake." "I didn't know," he said. "I would have come. I believe him. He's 11, and he's a good boy, the kind of good that you can't teach and can't fake, and I think he would have come. I think he would have sat in a hospital chair and held my hand, and it would have cost him nothing because that's just who he is." "I know," I said. "I know you would have." He's been coming nearly every other Saturday since then. His sister comes sometimes too. My daughter-in-law drops them off without coming in. Trevor came once to pick them up and stood in my doorway and said, casually, "You seem good, Mom." And I said, "I am, thank you." And that was that. There are things left to say, and I want to be careful with them. In January, I used a portion of Dennis's life insurance, $30,000, to pay for a home care assessment and prepay a year of personal emergency response service, the kind where you have a button you wear around your neck. I also spoke to an elder care consultant at the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority, who helped me put together what she called a care plan, a document that listed, in detail, who should be contacted in what order if something happened to me again. Dottie is the first contact now, not Trevor. I told Trevor this in March. I called him on a Sunday. Some habits persist, and I told him clearly and calmly. I said, I've made some changes to my emergency contact information and my estate planning. I want you to know, not to discuss it, just to know." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Mom, are you angry with me?" I said, "No, I'm not angry. I'm just different now. After September, I'm different." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "I should have been there." "Yes," I said, "you should have." And then, because I'm his mother, and I'll always be his mother, I said, "I love you. That hasn't changed." He got a bit choked up then. So did I. We talked for 45 minutes, the longest we'd talked since Dennis died. He told me some things I hadn't known, about the pressure from his wife's family, the financial stress, the way he'd felt pulled in directions that all led away from me. I'm not sure I understand it fully. I'm not sure it changes what happened. But I heard him. I let it in. The new will stands. The grandchildren's RESP accounts are funded and growing. Dottie is my first contact. The emergency button is on my nightstand, not around my neck yet, but close. I've been taking a watercolor class on Tuesday mornings at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. I'm not good at it. There's a man in the class named Roger who teaches us things about light I never would have known to look for. My grandson thinks my paintings are beautiful, which is the opinion that matters most. I'm not angry. I said that to Trevor and I meant it. Anger is heavy, and I'm 73, and I've got things to do. But I am different now. I know something I didn't know before September. Something about what I owe to myself. About whose hand I want holding mine in a moment of crisis. About the difference between family as a title and family as a choice. Dottie and I have dinner on Wednesday nights. She makes flying fish when she can get it, and I make the potato bread my mother taught me. And we talk about everything and nothing, and sometimes we watch Jeopardy and shout the wrong answers, and it is, genuinely, one of the best parts of my week. I sold Dennis's life insurance policy on nothing. I kept every dollar of it. And last week, when my grandson's friend's birthday party ran long and nobody could pick him up, I drove across the city in a January deep freeze, -28 with the wind chill, and I was at the curb in front of that house before he even had his jacket on. He climbed in and said, "Hi, Grandma, you're warm." I said, "Of course I am. I'm always here."